What is your key takeaways from today, now that you've heard the children's views, and what do you plan on doing?
We spend a lot of time as a government discussing different issues with all variety of groups around about the country and different interested parties. And this is an annual occasion where we can hear directly the views of children and young people in Scotland. I think it's important that formally we have one opportunity to hear that during the year. A couple of the themes that were raised with us. The first is how young people feel, in particular the issues around about mental health and bullying, and how so much of how young people feel is influenced by their experience during the COVID pandemic, which I would acknowledge has had a really quite a negative effect on young people. So we've got to try to help young people feel more optimistic and more positive as a consequence. And the second issue, I think, is about the need for us to take action on climate. There was very clearly a lot of anxiety expressed around the need to take action on climate, and that will very much feature in the government's plans that we bring forward.
This is our 8th cabinet takeover and your first as First Minister, and we've got a really long history of these meetings being quite successful and really exciting. I wanted to ask, what impact have these meetings had on you in the past, and what are your hopes for them in the future?
My impression in the past has always been that we've discussed issues of substance that mattered to children and young people, and children and young people essentially set the agenda. So it's not the government saying this is what we should talk about, it's the other way around. And that's so important because that sometimes brings some pretty blunt challenge to government, and we should embrace that. We should just recognise that's the case and address it. So that's my key observation, that often we hear the views and the points expressed by young people, and sometimes those are expressed in a challenging way because young people are concerned about those issues. And that's as it should be. And today was no different. Today was an example of difficult issues being set out really powerfully by the children and young people. And of course I reflect on that and think about what a strength that is for Scotland, that we've got young people who are so capable of making that contribution, and it's really welcome.
How are you going to share what you've heard today throughout government, and how will we know as children and young people that our views have been taken seriously?
I think all of these issues are issues that are material to the government's agenda, so we've got to make sure that what we talked about today is reflected in the choices and the decisions that government makes. So I think over time I would hope you would see in what the government does a greater attention to some of the issues that have been raised today. At a personal level, there was a discussion about gender-based violence, and gender-based violence, of course, is basically male violence against women and girls in our society. And as a male First Minister, I think I've got something particularly to do to demonstrate leadership on that question and to make sure that we are able to take the action in our society to change men's behaviour, because that's what's got to change. And very powerfully, those points have been put to the Cabinet today, and as a male First Minister, I intend to give leadership to make sure we address that point.
Another issue we've spoken a lot about today is youth work, and this is a really good example of youth work in action. How do you see it supporting your government's priority to eradicate child poverty, as mentioned in the programme for government?
I've always seen firsthand the importance of youth work within our society. I thought we also heard particularly powerful examples of how youth work has quite literally transformed the lives of some of the young people involved, and transformed is a word I think is a fair description of what's happened. So making sure that we've got investment in place that supports youth work is critical to what we have to do as a society. There were some interesting points put forward about multi-year funding, so that there can be a bit of stability in the provision of these services, because if these services are truly transforming the lives of young people in our society, we've got to make sure they're able to be delivered and that they're sustainable. And that's obviously a priority for the government as we settle on the terms of our budget.
Thank you very much, First Minister, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have the discussions that we've had with children and young people in Scotland. and the government will take those issues very seriously.